So we're going to go into the series, Writing is Rewriting. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how everyone needs edits and why edits are so important. So when you're thinking about just starting out, you have to remember that first drafts are never perfect, no matter how much you want them to be. Writing is often very hard. And during a first draft, you might hit a flow state where your ideas are clear and endless and the whole thing just comes easily. But more likely, you're going to struggle a bit and you won't always know what to say or what to include. If you find yourself becoming frustrated, don't let those feelings keep you from continuing. Instead, you should remember that writing is rewriting and you can change the things that you don't like at a later point. So, it is okay to just write filler, knowing you'll have to go back and edit it down. You can mark certain sections if you just know that you're going to have to edit and revise them later. In fact, it can be much better to just write as much as you possibly can in the beginning stages and just know that you'll have to change them later on. Don't worry if it doesn't seem quite right in the moment. It is much better to write too much than too little. And honestly, you probably won't even have just 2 drafts. It's really lucky if you do. Revisions are all part of the process, and they're not something to dread. So when it comes to editing yourself, once you finish your draft, reread it and then make notes about what you like and then maybe what you think you should change. Those small notes might be big changes like full cuts to certain sections, or maybe just tweaks to a few particular words or sentences. Your edits can help you learn more about your own writing style and particular tendencies. Revising your own work will help you understand what you do well and what you should work on improving. So let's jump into a student example, and we're going to edit and revise it later on. So in this passage, we'll read, "Making this decision feels like walking on a tightrope. I find myself torn between 2 wonderful options, joining the school orchestra or auditioning for the choir. On one hand, the orchestra offers the chance to learn an instrument, create beautiful music together, and be part of an ensemble. I've always been fascinated by the violin, and being in the orchestra would allow me to express myself through the power of melodies. On the other hand, the choir captivates me with the magic of harmonies and the joy of singing with others. The thought of blending my voice with fellow choir members and performing in concerts fills my heart with excitement. It's an incredibly difficult choice, as both options have their unique appeal. I find myself deliberating, considering my love for both instruments and singing, hoping to make the right decision that will shape my middle school journey." So let's jump into edits. We'll look at these sentences. On the one hand and on the other hand. Isn't on the one hand and on the other hand a little cliche? And it's also pretty repetitive. And repetition can get kind of boring. It can really bog you down in the piece that you're reading. I also want to note that fills my heart with excitement is also pretty cliche. Referencing your heart when you're tasked with a major decision is a little sentimental, and it's also not very original. You also don't really need to write, "It's an incredibly difficult choice." This goes without saying, so it can be cut. And then let's look at the ending. I find myself deliberating, considering my love for both instruments and singing, hoping to make the right decision that will shape my middle school journey. I think this ending could be stronger. The student says she's hoping to make the right decision that will shape her middle school journey. But it would be more interesting for her to explore and then go into detail what her life would look like if she went down one path or if she went down the other. Showing those 2 options would just make the ending a little bit more vivid, a little bit more exciting. So when it comes to getting other opinions, that editing process that we just went through is an example of collaboration and revisions, of working with somebody else. It can be very useful to think of editing as a conversation. And like any good conversation, different perspectives will be considered, and a stronger conclusion will ultimately be reached. In book, newspaper, and magazine publishing processes, an editor is assigned to help you reshape your arguments or your storylines, and generally just to make your work as good as it can possibly be. So think about a teacher's notes and feedbacks. It's not always pleasant to receive word that something should be changed, but it's always useful to learn what somebody else got out of your writing, right? So you should ask multiple people or even a whole group or just maybe one person. But you have to make sure that they're a person with taste you trust who will be honest with you. You shouldn't just ask maybe a friend of yours who maybe doesn't care as much about writing. You should ask people who you know are going to offer good feedback. Now, when it comes to enjoying the editing process, you have to remember that the opportunity to learn and improve is something that you want. It's about growth, right? Often you associate editing with more work and with teacher feedback that can be kind of painful to receive, somebody marking up your essay. But bettering your own writing is always a worthwhile goal. And you should remember that everyone, even professional writers, need edits. In editing, you'll become better acquainted with your own writing style, voice, and habits. And you'll gain a much deeper appreciation for how hard writers work. You can also look at your different drafts and see how much you've grown and developed as a writer. Tracking those changes can be very encouraging in the end.